Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to...
Does Europe need its own social media platforms?
This video
I
is
thought it
brought
already
to you
has
by
it.
Ground News.
Like,
Little? Like LT.lt? It's like,
that's domain name, not social media platform.
like, it's like a Facebook, but it's not a Facebook.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Russians meet dot...
Ah,
Are you?
Yes,
I don't know.
Russia. No, Russia does have their own social media
Yeah.
platform. Yeah, they do.
We've talked a lot about European strategic autonomy on this channel, but never in relation to the digital sphere.
Oh, Red
The
Book?
truth is, the
Oh,
EU
Europe
is
does that,
enormously
yeah.
dependent on American and Chinese tech, undermining its digital autonomy and exposing it to potential disinformation and political interference. In the past few months, the battle between the EU and the US tech giants has flared up, with US Vice President JD Vance attacking the EU for its efforts to regulate online content, and the European Commission last month fined Apple €500 million and Meta €200 million over non-compliance with its Digital Markets Act. Some MEPs have therefore suggested that Europe should build its own alternative social media platforms, while other suggestions include funding existing European platforms like Mastodon to make them into a continent-wide public-private platform. So in this video, we'll look at the EU's digital sovereignty crisis and some of the arguments for and against the EU.
Do they need a separate one from America?
I mean, they do need to, like, have at least something in the social media network of it all. Like, you're completely out of not even having one platform. Even Canada has, what is it called? Rumble? That's Canada, right?
It is Canadian, but I mean, it's not really a competition for YouTube.
Yeah, but at least there's one available just in case
Well,
they
there
were
is
to be
one in-
booted.
There is one in Europe too, the one they mentioned, whatever.
What's it called again?
I don't know. They mentioned
Well,
it.
then they have one then. It's just the people, they don't want to use it at this time because they're not forced to, but they should at least have something.
I just feel like they would need a lot of funding to compete with Facebook and all
You
the
see what
others.
happened when they tried to take away TikTok from US Americans? We went straight to China. We went to Redbook.
EU having its own social media. Who is the most influential person in up a copy of our magazine? 22, the EU's Digital Markets Act, or DMA, was established to reduce the monopoly held by 6 so-called gatekeeper platforms: the US companies Alphabet, which owns Google and thereby YouTube, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, plus the Chinese firm ByteDance, which owns TikTok. Alongside the DMA, the EU also established the Digital Services Act, or DSA, aimed at improving user safety, forcing companies to combat disinformation, label ads, and make it easier for users to report illegal content. Both pieces of legislation tackled concerns over the enormous and largely unchecked power that the US tech firms have across multiple jurisdictions. Just think about how many European governments use Facebook or Instagram for public communication, WhatsApp for internal comms, and the monopoly that Google holds over search. This all leaves the EU exposed to potential geopolitical
Viber is
coercion.
not
For
European?
instance,
Could be, I don't know. Viber, and there's Telegram too.
Yeah.
through platforms censoring pro-European content but promoting anti-EU.
But those are not really social media per se. They're like messaging apps.
They mentioned WhatsApp. That's why I brought it up.
I know, yeah. They are like WhatsApp, yes. But I wouldn't consider WhatsApp social media either. It's like a
WhatsApp, you
messaging.
can put your status. You could say what's on your mind.
What's in your mind?
Pro-US narratives to users. But what's really got the conversation going recently is Donald Trump. In early April, Trump announced a 20% tariff on imports from the EU, now reduced to 10% until the end of a 90-day negotiation period, prompting the EU to consider its retaliatory options, including
I just don't know if creating a European social media network is in the European priority list. I feel like
Do you guys even have the stars to manage it? Like, I feel like they would need a big star from the UK to really
Star?
champion. Yeah, to use it and to make it cool, to
Oh, yeah,
popularize
they would
it.
take like any athlete, the big athlete.
So
or
who would be
something.
the biggest out of UK
What?
or
Not UK,
Europe
what?
or?
Cristiano Ronaldo or something. But
But then I don't think does he write his status in English or for everyone to understand, or is it gonna be in his language?
if he got paid, he'll figure it out.
But then they're not gonna think it's him. It has to come
Uh,
across genuine.
I don't know.
Because the person
'Cause-
who has the most following, I believe, is him.
Yeah, it
So
is
he
him.
could really set it off if they wanted to.
The thing is, the social media is not just about like regular people using it. It's about content creators. They would need to invest a lot of money into paying content creators.
They're there. They're available.
No, they're available, but they're not gonna do it for free. Like if
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not,
of course.
if I'm not getting paid nothing, I'm not gonna post videos on whatever
But
European media
if
is.
it's to get exposure on something that could be considered a competitor to Facebook, there will be some that will be able to sign on.
I
to
think
that.
it would be interesting from a content creator perspective to diversify and like, make alternative income on that. So that is always interesting. But at the same time, it has to be worth your while. It can't just be like pennies that you're getting paid and then you know. But I'm just saying, like, doesn't Europe have enough on their plate already with like actual issues to
Everyone
focus
has
on?
issues.
No, but money is limited. They
Yeah.
have a lot of shit going on and money is limited. They can't
Well,
spend money on social media.
They're finding Facebook, Apple. They can use this money now.
They're using
for-
that money to develop militaries, to build arms for the war. Like they don't want to depend on America for protection, so they want to build up their militaries. They need that. They have the energy crisis with the gas. They need money for that. They have immigration crisis. They have
So
so much
why they're talking about what's the purpose for them needing their own platform then?
Click-
Why is it raised as an issue?
clickbait. I just don't think that's like high up the priority list of, oh, let's give some social media company 100 million euros to get them going.
Oh, I don't know. We'll see.
I don't even think 100 million would be enough. We're probably talking billions of funding that they would need to like actually compete with American social media. Because the pockets of those companies, the revenues that they do, I don't know.
Including
Like, look, they just got fined like $500 million, and it's like nothing. €500 million.
You press start for half a second.
Yes,
You have something else.
a possible
I
tax
did.
on digital advertising revenues that would hit X, Amazon, Google, and Facebook. However, the White House has signaled it would view a retaliation against its tech firms as a hostile act, having repeatedly portrayed the EU's efforts to monitor content online as censorship and criticised the EU's regulatory processes for stifling business. Trump's willingness to bring regulatory issues into trade negotiations limits the EU's ability to rein in big tech. And we've also seen this in the UK recently, where the government agreed not to increase its digital services tax on the US tech giants
Well,
in order
there
to
you
secure
go.
a
Interesting enough, here in the States, it's not like the US government is supporting an active role for social media techs to take over and have major control. If anything, government is trying to limit social media's control and their control overall. So why would it be in Europe now government would be involved or be the factor that gets the ball rolling
Where-
to have social media platforms?
Where else
in
is this
Europe?
money gonna come from?
Well, I don't think that's government's concern. That's y'all's concern. Whoever wants it, someone else.
Okay, but nobody wanted it up until now. So why would they?
So who's the person who wants it now?
This channel?
Oh,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Trade
I
deal.
don't get it.
Moreover, while some EU member states, like France, are keener on taking action against US tech, others, notably Germany, are wary. With Germany's finance minister, Jörg Kukies, noting that the EU
Even
has, quote,
US
no real
is afraid of US tech. So it's like, I don't think the answer is that Europe needs some platform.
alternatives to the offering by the American digital industry. So this has all prompted questions about whether the EU should build its own social media platforms. There's been some chatter about this both among MEPs and Europeans on Reddit, so we thought we'd weigh up some of the pros and cons. We'll start with the arguments in favour. Firstly, if the EU had its own social media platforms, it could better monitor political content online and prevent election interference or disinformation from third parties. Ahead of Germany's 2025 federal election in February, a court ruled that Elon Musk's X must provide access to data on politically related content, as there were fears that it would push content promoting Musk's favoured far-right AfD party. Romania's ongoing political crisis was also sparked partly over concerns of Russian interference on social media,
You know
which
what's
could
gonna
maybe
happen when Europe has its own platform? They're gonna say all the phones here are not gonna have any US apps, social media platforms. No, they don't follow the regulations here, so they're not allowed here. Just like what they do with the meat. If the US tech want to be in Europe, they're gonna have to follow the same rules and guidelines that we give our EU social media platforms.
I think that's
It's gonna be the same thing.
I think that's the only way to compete with Europe with American tech is make the laws such that American it's almost impossible for American tech to comply, so they have to withdraw from the continent.
Yeah.
Because if they can compete, Americans will just due to sheer amount of money, they will just crush the competition. Or eventually just buy it out. If European gets too big, watch this. Facebook just buys it for 20 billion, and they're gonna sell because they want money.
The thing is, the difference between like, okay, making it impossible for them to compete is that there's already people who already make a living using social media, American social media. So are you gonna tell them to stop making money?
Yes, European people that make off actual this channel we watch it, they're European,
They
they're
would be
making
at
money
risk?
of so
They would be at risk.
I feel like things like that have to happen organically and not forced. If a European social media develops organically and it just happens, because happens not because it's like a Facebook, Instagram, TikTok knockoff, just European, but actually something different. Like when TikTok happened, we didn't have anything like that before, and we didn't know we needed that before. Like we just didn't have it. We had like Facebook, not Facebook, Instagram Reels, I think.
Before it was called, that app was called Musically, and then it turned into TikTok.
Okay. Well, but did we have Instagram Reels, or the Reels came with TikTok as a, try to compete? Do you remember?
I think so.
I think if we didn't have Instagram Reels, you could upload videos on Instagram for sure. So we just had Instagram and we could upload a video or two or whatever. We didn't know we needed TikTok, just endless scrolling of videos, just it never stops. Apparently we did. So I say that to say that if Europe can develop something creative that doesn't exist now, that would get stuck like TikTok, then that I have no problem with that whatsoever. And I think that could compete with American money. But if we're just taking American, knocking it off, calling it European, and just like, oh, let's everybody move from Facebook to Ubook, I just don't see that happening.
Had been prevented if the EU controlled its own platforms. Another argument in favour is that the US and China already effectively have their own social media bubbles, which leaves the EU out in the cold, as it has no way of controlling content on any major US or Chinese-owned platform. This also shapes European culture and arguably limits the EU's soft power, with social media trends and online culture massively influenced by the US and American influences. Finally, there's a precedent for publicly owned broadcast media, with many European governments funding national TV and radio stations, and a similar argument could be made for publicly owned European social media platforms, especially given that social media is growing as a news source for many people, and is now the main news source for 16 to 30-year-olds in the EU. Now for the arguments against. The main one is that the US platforms are better than any current European alternatives. They're less fragmented, easier to use, and the so-called network effects mean that once you've already got a base of millions of interconnected users, convincing that base to move to a different platform is very tricky. This is why, despite widespread condemnation of Musk's management of X and predictions of its death, European politicians continue to share updates and announcements on there. Another point is that, despite concerns over harmful content on American platforms, any engagement-driven algorithm will likely...
As a public official, I wonder, in Europe, so they post it first on, like, X immediately? So everyone's already on X?
I think they post on all this social media networks simultaneously. You know those software, you click and you connect all the platforms and you click press and it posts on all of them?
But I wonder if it's... Well, particularly, I think it's slow for them to tell their local, like, reporters or news to break this, because they can break it quicker in these other apps. And then eventually the local news will be able to write up and to speak on it. But then new news, new information would already come about.
I don't know. I think it just spreads quickly. It's
because you know how we have here in our local city, there's like they send out a mass email if the mayor wants to make an announcement. I wonder similarly, probably they do the same. They probably send like a mass email of what the mayor or what the...
Yeah, and I think simultaneously with the email they also post on social media.
Favor sensationalist or extremist content, as this tends to be
more...
more...
first to hear news, like, is it faster to hear news from them on X or as opposed to...
I think everybody at the same time. Well, unless you are in that office, word of mouth. But if you're like getting it remotely, I think everybody's at the same time.
Applicable. So it's not necessarily the case that a European alternative would be any less toxic or less susceptible to misinformation than the current US platforms. Indeed, it's even possible that a European social media platform could end up creating an EU echo chamber of some sort, which wouldn't be good for transatlantic dialogue or people trying to inform themselves about international news. Finally, it may simply be too difficult. Europe's digital industry is nowhere near as developed as the US is, especially when it comes to cybersecurity and AI. And Europe doesn't have the same startup culture as the US, which makes getting tech companies off the ground even harder. The fact that the EU is also effectively made up of 27 different markets, each with different populations and languages, also means that any media ecosystem will inevitably be fragmented. Whereas the US social media firms have access to 340 million Americans, plus another billion people around the world who speak English as a foreign language. The EU is apparently aware of this predicament too. According to a Bloomberg report from last month, a European Commission draft document concedes that the EU won't be able to break free from its reliance on US tech anytime soon, stating decoupling is unrealistic and cooperation will remain significant.
Yeah, why
But
would
whilst
they?
it doesn't look like
They
we'll
already
get...
have followings, like that's hard to build. Like that was a lot of effort and investment to build that up. They had to hire a team of people who specialize in social media, who developed their following, was able to maintain it. So why would they just, throw it in the trash? They wouldn't.
I just don't think that's priorities right now. I
Yeah.
think the priorities is not social media. We have a war on our hands. We have immigration crisis, energy crisis, politics,
At the end of the day,
right-wing crisis. I don't really think social media is just
yeah.
afterthought.
And at the end of the day, they need to spread their news to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So they're not focusing on giving up any platform that they already have.
European social media anytime soon. We are seeing EU member states increasing investment in AI, with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, for instance, formally establishing a new digital ministry last week, aimed at improving digital competitiveness and innovation. If the EU were to try to develop its own social media, its regulatory power could actually prove useful here, for example by mandating US platforms to interconnect with European alternatives. The EU could also introduce tax breaks for organisations and creators using European platforms to encourage growth. But for the foreseeable future, European digital sovereignty will probably remain a distant dream. This is a complex and nuanced story.
Yeah.
Is that a good name?
Uter, like a Twitter, but uter. Sounds funny, like uterus.
Okay. Can I see the comments?
Yeah. The editor had some fun with this thumbnail. Oh, what's the thumbnail? I don't know. The wider challenge here is owning the data and the infrastructure. Any product built in the EU will still struggle not to rely on the likes of Amazon, Google, and Microsoft for cloud services. I'd love to see the EU invest in building an EU-based challenger to those cloud service providers. Well, that's something, yeah. You spend any time of social media, you will notice that everyone there is still talking in English about America. Truly European alternative would have a translation option as one of the core features. Yeah, and it would have to be like a voice translation too, I guess, not just captions.
Okay, guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord, and as always, share as much kindness as possible. Bye.